Good morning, church family. It's a joy to be here. It is joy to wake up this morning, step outside, and go, finally, some relief. But it is good to be here. For those, Ken, thank you for your thoughts and directing us, especially as it is 21st anniversary of a very impactful time in our country. And just that moment, the moment of silence that we had earlier, and really, there's part of me, I'm with you, that church attendance across the board was up at every flavor of church for about the next 5 to 6 years after 9/11, and then we started hitting our chance to start giving more and more excuses to not show up. And so it's kind of within that flavor that we're starting a new series talking about the excuses that hold us back. Those excuses that have stopped us from the growth and even what God desires in our life. And we are full of excuses. And not just simply to not come to church. In fact, I ran across the list of excuses that a local pastor stopped attending sporting events. Here's what he said. There's 10 reasons, because he's a pastor. You got to do things in tens. Every time I went, they asked for money. You got to pay to get into these things, right? The people with whom I sat with didn't seem very friendly. The seats were hard. The coach never came and talked to me. The referee made a decision that I could not agree with. Some games went into overtime, and it really made me late getting home. The band played some songs that I was not familiar with, I've never heard before. The game times really didn't fit my schedule. I read the playbook, I know how the game should go, and so I don't need to show up. Or number 10, my parents took me to way too many sporting events growing up, and I'm just too tired. Now, as you know, that is facetious. That is meant to mimic some of the top 10 reasons people give for not attending church. But it sounds silly whenever we talk about it with a sporting event, but somehow it sounds logical when we talk about how someone isn't attending church anymore. We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's because excuses on the surface make sense. We are full of excuses. Excuses from a distance look a whole lot like reasons. If someone gives an excuse, they're putting up a wall and saying, here's my excuse why I can't, why I didn't, why this is this way, why I am that way, why she is that way, why he is that way. Here's the excuses, and from a distance we look at that and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's reasonable. Because most excuses are reasonable. The good ones are. And we put up these walls of excuses, but we need to recognize they are not reasons. They're not the same thing. An excuse masquerades itself as a reason, but it is not. There's a reason that I can't run a marathon. There's a reason I can't do that. But what I'm going to offer you is a bunch of excuses of why I don't. I'm not in shape. I just can't do it. I'm not fast enough. I'm too busy. I will die. There's plenty of excuses that I will give you. And I think some of these are legitimate. But here's the thing. There is no reason for me not to try. But I'll give you every excuse to stop me. The reason is I don't want to. So I will give you every excuse to not have to tell you that. Because that sounds like I'm just not wanting to be healthy, not wanting to, do this thing. And I don't want people to think poorly upon me, so I will give you all these excuses. I have plenty of excuses, but they hold me back. There's a fine line between an excuse and a reason. In fact, think about it this way. Whenever someone is giving excuses, and they keep on giving a lot of excuses for something, do you know we have a saying to them? Like, you probably know this. It's stop making excuses, right? You know that, right? You know what's funny about this? This highlights the difference between reasons and excuses. Excuses are things that you make up. They are things that you fabricate. You are making excuses. The reasons are legit. But to justify our reasons, we fabricate excuses and we continue to make them up. This is how we deal with our excuses. This is how we deal with life, is we make up excuses. And they aren't real reasons, they're just barriers. Now, we have reasons that we make up our excuses. But don't for a minute think that the excuse that you hear from someone or the excuse that you give from someone is the truth. In fact, more often than not, the excuses that we give are lies that we're telling ourselves and hoping that others believe it as well. The excuses that we give are lies that we tell ourselves, and we hope that others believe those lies as well. Thing is, if we could ever get behind the excuses, that all these walls that we put up of our excuses, get behind those excuses and head into the real reason, deal with the real reason that we're struggling with this, that we're not doing the things that we should do, or we're doing things that we shouldn't do, or whatever it is. If we were dealt with the real reason, we actually might be able to grow in ways that we could never, ever imagine before. But the thing is, our excuses are holding us back. And this is important because there is a relationship between your ability to follow God and your willingness to push through the excuses of why you don't. There's a balance between this. There's a relationship. We're going to see this looking at a pretty famous person in the Bible. His name is Moses. I'm sure you've heard of him. And Moses has a story, a calling story, in Exodus 3. We're going to look at this because it really mimics what we do quite often. So check out, starting in Exodus 3, verse 1, it says this: One day, Moses was tending a flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself, which would be something that I would say as well, right? Why isn't this bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord told him, I've certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, and the other ites all live, all of them. Bunch of ites live there now, all right? Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and now I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I'm sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt. I love this little story. I mean, this is a story that has been highlighted and it has been shown in multiple ways. Many TV appearances of this, trying to get and encapsulate what is going on here. You have this burning bush that doesn't cease to burn. It doesn't even seem that it's charred, is the idea here. Like the leaves are still on it and it's burning, and it's an amazing thing. So much so that Moses even says, this is amazing. And you have the voice of God speaking from this bush. It's talking directly to a human. All sorts of stuff. Like if you were to choose to go back to any moment in history, this is one of those that a lot of people choose. They're like, I would like to be there and see that. I would love to be a part of this. Do you know who wouldn't want to be a part of this? Moses. It's crazy. The one person that gets to be a part of this is the very one that's like, yeah, you know what? I would be much happier had I not been part of this. See, Moses didn't want this. And he says so right there, next verse. But Moses protested to God. Have you ever protested to God? Have you ever said, but God, I really want to do it some other way. But God, Have you thought about doing it my way? I kind of like my way. But God, I don't think that'll work. But God, I don't want to. Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people out of Israel out of Egypt? It's actually a pretty fair question that Moses is asking. Because Moses is about 80 years old at this point in the story. And he's had a pretty interesting 80 years. In fact, it's kind of nice that his life can be divided into 3 sets of 40 for us. It makes it really easy for us to remember kind of his age at different places of the story. The first 40 years, he is adopted by Pharaoh's family. He grows up in the royal family, but it's clear that he still knows that he is an Israelite. It's pretty clear. He knows this. He looks different. And he knows his heritage. Then, you get the sense that he was just born for greatness. You know, just the story of how he survived being put into the basket and then being saved by the royal family, growing up in this, you just know this guy was born for greatness. And maybe he knows it as well, so much so that he ends up trying to enact his greatness of saying, we need to do something against these slave drivers, and he kills an Egyptian. Well, that's a no-no in most of the world. You don't kill the oppressing people and get by with it. And so he runs away. And for 40 years, he hides as a shepherd in Midian. He's hiding from all of the identity that he has created for 40 years in the land of Egypt. He's hiding from all of it, and the idea is he's even hiding from God. And for 40 years, he's happy because he is in hiding. And then God shows up. And God says, hey, you know that thing that you thought you were destined for? Well, that's true, you were. It's just not at the right time. Let's go do it now. And Moses is like, hold up. Are you sure, God? Because Moses isn't so sure. The first thing that he gives is an excuse. The first time that he talks to God, first things that he says to God is an excuse. He says, who am I? Who am I to do this? What he's saying is, I'm not qualified. I'm not qualified to do this. Maybe 40 years earlier, I would have thought that I was qualified. I knew the story of me being saved from while all the other brothers were dying. They were being killed by Pharaoh. I was saved. I was one of the lone survivors of this time. Come on. I know that I'm destined for greatness. 40 years ago, I might have considered that. But now, Lord, I'm not qualified anymore. They don't even know who I am. Who am I to do this? Let me ask you this. He doesn't think he's qualified. He's a man on the run now. Let me ask you this. Do you think God gets more glory when he works through the unqualified, or whenever he works through the people that everyone knows is going to succeed? I think God can get glory either way, don't get me wrong. But we all know that whenever God shows up mighty into someone's life that they were not qualified to do what they just did, we're like, whoa, that's amazing. Not you're amazing, that's amazing. It's like a burning bush not consuming. Whenever God works through an unqualified person to do quality work, to do amazing things. Okay, Moses is saying, who am I? I'm not qualified. You know how God responds to him? God doesn't say, well, here's a course to go on leadership. Here's a book. Have you read Canoeing the Mountains? It's a great leadership book. You ought to go check it out, Moses. Before we go on this journey. God doesn't say that. God doesn't say, hey, here's how to boost up your resume. Here's the things that you need to do. You know what God says? Moses, I will be with you. That's all the quality that Moses needs. Because God knows that him saying, I'm not qualified, is an excuse. The real reason is that Moses has been lonely. Moses has been away from his family, away from his roots, and away from his God for 40 years. And he says, who am I to do this? I am the least person. I ran away from my duty. I ran away from my role. I ran away from God. Who am I to do this? And God says, hey, if loneliness is your problem, don't worry about it. I will be with you. You will never be lonely. You will never have to be lonely again. Now, God jumps straight to the reason, straight to the heart, just busts through that wall that Moses put up. But Moses wasn't done yet. Moses says, hey, wait, I got another excuse for you. Verse 13, Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? I always find this excuse kind of funny because this is one of those things that Israelites would have known how to address God. They would have known the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Like that's how he's been addressed. And Moses knows this, but he also knows humans. And for a long time, the Israelites have been in slavery and they've been doubting God themselves. They've been doubting if God really is who he says he is. And so he knows that whenever he goes back, they're going to say, okay, did God really send you, or was that the burrito you had the other night and you just had this feeling inside? You know, what is going on here? Let's figure this out. His excuse that he says is, who are you, Lord? I don't really know you. See, Moses isn't asking for the name of God. Moses is asking who God really is. Whenever they ask me, what's his name? This is something I want to know, God. Who are you? You see, everyone has been praying for salvation for years and years and years and years and years. For generations, they have been in slavery in Egypt. It's about 400 years of slavery. That's a long time, in case you hadn't figured that out. Like, that is longer than the United States of America has been the United States of America. They've been in slavery that long and longer, okay? That's where they've been. And every generation has prayed for deliverance. And God has been silent. And now Moses is on the run. He thought he knew God's plan. He thought he knew, I'm the guy that's here to save Israel. I'm in the perfect situation because I'm an Israelite raised in the royal family. I've got the credentials. I've got the experience. I've got the things that are needed. And then God doesn't show up. I don't really know who you are, God. God answers this. He answers this excuse. In verse 14 it says, God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. Not only do we get this wonderful section, especially for Jews following, they will come back to this of saying, this is the name of God. This is the name that we hold in reverence. I am. This is Yahweh. This is the one that, this is the moment that God reveals himself. Yeah, but not only are we getting that, what we're getting is God pouring through an excuse of Moses. He's busting through this excuse of saying, you don't know me? I'm the same God that was with you. I'm the same God that was with you when you were 2 years old. I'm the same God that was with you whenever you were 40 years old. And I'm the same God that is continuing to be with you when you're 80. And I'm calling you. Moses is doubting. He wouldn't want to say the real reason he's asking this question, but the real reason is he is doubting God. And God says, I am who I am. This is me. And you know me. We've been together. Moses was doubting God because Moses was hurt that God didn't follow through with Moses' plan. And that hurts. When God doesn't follow through with the plans that we think are from God, but are really from us. When we don't have the patience to go with God's timing, or on the other side of it, possibly, we are neglectful of God's timing, we procrastinate with God's timing. It can go either way. Sometimes we want to move faster than God, sometimes God wants to move faster than us. But whenever we're not in sync with His timing, we often get hurt and we blame it on God. And in all reality, we are the ones to blame. So Moses isn't done with his excuses. Chapter 4, verse 1, but Moses again protested. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? It's of the same kind of thinking of, who are you, Lord? But now the excuse is a legitimate one. No one will believe me. Or at least it's legitimate on the surface. Because in all reality, who cares if anyone believes you? If God is with you, who cares if people believe you? You have a mission from God. You have been sent. No one will believe me is not the question. That's not the concern. That's not the wall, the barrier. It was holding Moses back, but it shouldn't hold anyone back, because we are not the ones who are in charge of other people's beliefs. We are only in charge of our beliefs and what we do with them. And so if no one else believes me, as Joshua might have said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And it doesn't matter what other people do. It doesn't matter what they do to me, what they want to do to me. But Moses is putting up this wall saying, I'm not sure I believe you, God. No one will believe me, partly because I don't believe you, God. That's a reason behind this excuse. No one else is going to believe me. Why? Well, because I'm not sure I believe you. I'm not sure I believe the one who sent me. All Moses could see was the obstacles. He talks about all the obstacles. He's having a hard time believing what God is telling him could have come true. In fact, what he might have been saying is, I hear what you're saying, God, but I just don't think it's going to work. And this is probably a phrase that we have repeated ourselves. Is, God, I hear what you're saying, the call that you have in my life, I just don't think it's going to work. I don't think that that's going to turn out the way that you think it is, because I know people. Like, I've lived here long enough that I know how people work, and that's not going to work, Lord. Have you ever gotten into one of those kind of arguments with God, and then when you step back, you're like, oh my word, I honestly said I've lived long enough to know people better than God? I've said similar things, and I step back and I'm like, whoa, tap the brakes, Mitch. I am totally challenging the creator of humanity to a question of who knows people better. Yeah, I'm going to lose that one. But I've done it, and I'm sure you have too. That we've said, God, I don't like your plan. Can we kind of tweak it? Can we kind of change your plan? Can we fix this aspect? Can we change this over here? No one will believe me. God answers with this excuse with evidence of God's power. He gives 3 different miracles or signs to Moses. One is he turns a staff into a snake and then back into a staff, which is really cool, by the way. Whole lot cooler than the second one, where he gives Moses leprosy in his hand and then takes it away. I'll take the staff to the snake every time, Lord. Let's do that. The last one's weird, but it has ramifications through the rest of the Bible. He turns water into blood. And that's weird. But these are the signs, and these signs will show up again to Pharaoh, because these are the signs that you will believe. But Moses isn't still convinced. He's got another excuse. Verse 10, but Moses pleaded with the Lord, "Oh Lord, I am not very good with words. I never have been, and I am not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." I love that. You want to know his excuse here? I don't have the right gift. If you really wanted me to do this, Lord, you would have given me the right kind of gifts so that I can do what you've asked me to do. Have you ever told God that before? I'm just not gifted in this area. So, God would not want me to go serve in that area because He didn't give me the right gifts for it. That is not how that works. Now, I want you to know, it is important for you to know the gifts that God has given you. I believe God has given every one of us a gift, maybe even multiple gifts to varying degrees, that we are meant to use in the kingdom. But it is a mistake to think that God will only call you according to the things that you can do good. Because if that's all He called you to, we would be lacking in a whole bunch of things. He doesn't just equip the gifted. He gifts the equipped. And He says, here's your equipping. I am going to be with you. I am going to work through you. I am going to give you everything that you need. And that's what He basically tells Moses. I will give you the words. You don't worry about that. Your job is to go because I am sending you. This isn't some negotiation, Moses. God isn't asking for help either. If God needed help, He might need the gifted. God doesn't need help. He needs the willing. And sometimes the not so willing to get it through their heads that God's going to use them. And that's Moses. Moses is throwing up excuses, all these excuses, and finally he gets to the real reason before God. He says, Lord, please, just send anyone else. Finally, he breaks through all the excuses. He gets down to the reason of it all. I don't want to. Now, whenever you tell God this, you know that you've come to a place of truth, because it feels really weird to tell God, well, I don't want to do what you're asking me to do. It's a whole lot nicer, it feels, to put up all these excuses. Well, I'm not gifted. No one will believe me. I don't have the right resume. I'm not all of these things. God, surely you can find someone better. In all reality, what we're saying is, I don't want to, God. All these excuses that I've hidden behind are just holding that little special place of vulnerability that says, God, I really don't want to do what you're telling me to do. And I'm going to find any excuse to not do what you're telling me to do. And the thing is, Moses was there. And we've been there. Moses knew what was going on. God knew what was going on. But God was willing to help Moses push through every one of those excuses. And I'm sure the children of Israel were very glad that God did not give up on Moses at his first excuse. He's like, oh, well, you're right. You're not the right guy. Let me go find someone else. I'm glad that God didn't stop whenever Moses gave up his second or his third or even his fourth excuse. He kept on pushing back all these excuses until he got to the truth, and he says, now we can work with that. I can work with the you're not wanting to, because now you're finally being truthful with yourself and with me. And basically what he says is, hey, got no choice in this, pal. You may not want to. It's not going to be easy. No one wants to. Let's go. That's what we're doing. Let's go. And Moses does. And because of this story, Israelites are blessed. Because of Moses pushing through his excuses, Israelites are blessed, and all the nations of the world are blessed. Every one of them. Because for now, what it teaches us is that God can work through our lame excuses if we let Him. So what excuses are holding you back from what God desires? I know I can't answer that for you. What I do know is the excuses whenever you bring them to me. Oh, and I hear them. You know that. I hear them from all of us. I hear them from myself. I hear them in the mirror. All the excuses. Well, I didn't come forward this morning because. And then here's your excuse. And a lot of times it's just because I don't want to. Oh, I didn't volunteer for this because. Excuse. What excuses are you creating as walls in your life that are actually hindering you from what God really wants you to do? Because that right there, if you can answer that question, then you'll start breaking through those excuses, start dealing with the real reason, and then maybe God is going to lead you into a place that you could never have imagined or dreamed of before. Because God can work with people who don't think that they're qualified, don't think that they're good enough, that don't think that they're the right person, but they are still willing to walk with God. What God wants is your willingness, not your excuses. So this morning, if you need to shed off some of those excuses that have held you back, if you need to just call them for what they are, Lord, I have given you more excuses than I could care to admit. And I want to say no more, but I know this is a long process. Whatever you might need to get rid of anything that is hindering you, the walls that you've created of excuses, then let it be known. Come as we stand and sing together.